I wonder if you have recurring dreams. I used to have a couple, setting off to school without shoes on and flying, jumping off buildings and cliffs and being able to fly or at least float down to the ground. The dream that we find in Daniel chapter 8 was one that Daniel had in the third year of King Belshazzar's reign. So 2 years after the dream he had in chapter 7. It's not quite a recurring dream, but there are similarities between the two dreams. However, whilst the dream or vision in chapter 7 was big picture stuff, 4 kingdoms or empires over a considerable period of time, worldwide stuff, the dream or vision in chapter 8 is more small picture stuff, which doesn't mean it's not important, of course. And as always, when studying the Bible, context is important. What was going on at the time? And at the time Daniel had this dream, God's chosen people were in exile. They were unable to access the temple. They were hundreds of miles from the land flowing with milk and honey that God had promised them and later given to them. They were no longer free, unable to govern themselves or practice their faith in the way they had done for more than 1,000 years. God's chosen people in need of encouragement, in need of reassurance, in need of hope. And in light of this, we might ask, is this dream about the end of the world or the end of time? Or is it about events in the not too distant future? And are there different lessons depending on which of those it is? If it's about the end of time, then it might encourage us to look for signs. If it's about events in the not too distant future, it will mean that the events have already now taken place. So we should focus less on looking for signs and more on what we can learn about patient endurance now. It's important to remember to look for the original context and meaning first. What's the obvious message, meaning, interpretation? And then ask what secondary or other meanings and interpretations there might be. So, Daniel chapter 8, what is the vision that Daniel has? Daniel sees himself in the city of Susa, the great Persian city about 200 miles southeast of Babylon, down near the Persian Gulf. And Daniel in his vision sees a ram with 2 long horns, one longer than the other, although it had grown later. Now, I'm not sure how Daniel knew that, how he knew that it had grown later, but maybe that's not surprising, because in dreams or visions, we often seem to know things that we haven't seen, don't we? Does that make sense? My dad was one of the first in the Northwest to breed Jacob sheep back in the late 1960s. The first time I visited chipping was in, I think it was 1975, when my dad was judging Jacob sheep here at the chipping show. And I like to think that this ram in Daniel's vision was a bit like a Jacob sheep, which quite often have large horns of unequal size. The ram that Daniel saw was a bully, butting everything out of its way. No one could stand against it or help its victims. We had 1 or 2 like that. Particularly dangerous when they have horns like a Jacob sheep horns. The ram in the vision becomes very great. Then a mad goat enters the vision, running from the west, running so fast its feet don't touch the ground. which sounds rather like a cartoon character. Is it Wile E. Coyote maybe? And Daniel tells us this goat had a single large horn between its eyes. Now, what does that sound like to you? Does it perhaps sound like a unicorn? The goat, let's trust Daniel on this one, the goat rushes at the ram and crashes into him, breaking off both the ram's horns. The ram is done for. It's helpless. It's defeated. No one was able to rescue the ram from the goat's power. This is a dramatic scene in a dramatic vision. And then the vision gets a bit weirder and even more confusing. The goat becomes very powerful, but then has his large horn broken off. We aren't told how that happens. 4 prominent horns grow in its place, pointing in 4 different directions. From one of these 4 horns comes another horn that grows and becomes itself very powerful. The power of this new horn extends to the south and east towards Israel. The power of this horn challenges heaven and attacks some of the heavenly army. It even challenges the commander of heaven's army by cancelling the daily sacrifice and destroying the temple. The armies of heaven are restrained from responding to the ram's attack, or the horn's attack rather. As a result, the daily sacrifice is halted and truth is overthrown. Daniel overhears 2 holy ones, possibly angels, discussing how long the events of the vision will last. How long will the rebellion that causes desecration stop the daily sacrifices for? How long will the temple and heaven's armies be trampled upon? And the answer is 2,300 evenings and mornings. What is Daniel told about the dream or vision? Daniel is given an interpretation of the vision by someone who looks like a man but is apparently an angel. Specifically Gabriel, Daniel is told. And Gabriel approaches Daniel and addresses him as Son of Man. And Daniel is terrified. He faints and falls to the ground, and Gabriel has to revive him. And then Gabriel tells Daniel what the vision means. First of all, he says the events relate to the time of the end. We'll park that one for a moment. Gabriel goes on to tell Daniel that the vision is about the time of wrath. Tells him that the 2-horned ram represents the Medes and the Persians, the dual or combined kingdom that was in power at the time. The goat represents the Greek Empire, specifically the first king of Greece, Alexander the Great. And the 4 horns that replace the 1 horn represent the breakup of the Greek Empire into 4 separate kingdoms. And that's all nice and clear, I think, apart from perhaps the first bit about the time of wrath. It's quite what that's all about. Gabriel then tells Daniel that at the end of their rule, that is the rule of the Greeks, a fierce king will rise to power who will cause a shocking amount of destruction and will devastate the holy people. He will be deceptive and arrogant and will destroy without warning, but in the end he will be broken, but not by human power. Gabriel ends by saying that the vision, which he says is about not only the time of wrath, but the 2,300 evenings and mornings, is true, but the events won't happen for a long time. So Daniel is told to keep the vision a secret. The interpretation and Daniel's encounter with Gabriel leave Daniel drained. He tells us he was overcome and that he lay sick for several days before he was able to get up and get on with his royal duties. And the vision continued to trouble Daniel. So, how could we interpret this vision? As I suggested earlier, this dream or vision could be regarded as either about the end times or about events which would occur within 200 or 300 years. The Greeks, and specifically Antiochus IV, who we mentioned last time. How should we interpret it though? Well, we should take the most obvious meaning and see if that makes sense, see if that fits. If it does, we can leave it there and learn the lessons. If it doesn't make sense or fit, we should then and only then look further for explanations. In this case, the most clear and obvious explanation fits and makes sense. Daniel is told clearly who the main protagonists are in this vision: the Medes and Persians and the Greeks. The Greek Empire did take over from the Medes and Persians and was at its peak around 400 BC with Alexander the Great, who conquered a large part of the then known world, including Persia and Egypt. The Greek Empire did split into four after 20 years of turmoil. Four of Alexander's generals each coming to dominate a section of the Greek Empire. Cassandra ruled over Macedonia and Greece. Lysimachus ruled over Thrace and Asia Minor. Seleucus ruled over Syria, and Ptolemy ruled in Egypt. In the final years of the Greek Empire, before Rome took control, Antiochus IV came to power. Antiochus IV was regarded as a bit of a loose cannon. He was somewhat quirky, able to move easily from warm and friendly to terribly tyrannical, which sounds like the description Gabriel gave of the deceptive and arrogant king who would destroy without warning. The coins that Antiochus IV had minted pictured him as Epiphanes, God manifest, or God revealed, the God in this case being the Greek god Zeus. 6 years after coming to power, Antiochus IV invaded Judea and captured Jerusalem. He looted the temple and carried out an horrific slaughter. 2 years later, he ordered a paganization program, abolishing the temple cult and observance of Jewish law, outlawing Jewish festivals, outlawing observation of the Sabbath, outlawing circumcision, and ordering sacrifices to heathen gods in all towns in Judea. And then finally, on the 15th of December 167 BC, a heathen altar was constructed in the temple in Jerusalem. The first sacrifice being made on Christmas Day 167 BC. Well, of course, it wasn't Christmas Day, but it was the 25th of December, or Kislev, the 12th month in the Jewish calendar. So Antiochus IV pretty well fits the bill for the Greek king who caused desolation, desecration and destruction. and the heathen pagan sacrifices lasting for around 3 years until Judas Maccabeus cleansed and rededicated the temple in December 164 BC. And this equates to roughly 1150 days, which, if you take the how long will the desecration last that the angel discussed as being 2,300 evenings and mornings, 2 a day, so 2,300 divided by 2 works out about right, 1150 days. If you argue, as some have, that 2,300 should be interpreted as days, that equates pretty much to the total period of oppression by Antiochus IV, which began around 171 BC. So it seems to fit. What about the end of time a bit? Well, Gabriel clearly says that the vision is about the time of the end and the time of wrath and the 2,300 evenings and mornings. So if we take those three together and say the vision is about the last Greek king and his period of destruction and desecration, makes sense. It's clearly about the temple and sacrifices. So given the temple was destroyed in 70 AD and the sacrificial system along with it, and despite what some mainly Trump supporters say about the temple being rebuilt for a second time at some point in the not too distant future, this vision is clearly about something which hadn't happened at the time of the vision, but has happened now. The vision in chapter 7 was a much more worldwide, long time scale vision, although one that I would argue has now taken place. This vision in chapter 8, although it foresaw events which were for Daniel well into the future, has come to pass. So we need to look not at what it might say about future events, but what it has to teach us about our time and our circumstances. What does the dream have to teach, both then and now? It's sometimes said about footballers who are going through difficult times, struggling for form. It's sometimes said that form is temporary, class is permanent. Form is temporary, class is permanent, meaning they'll come good in the end because they're talented and possess class as a player. God is teaching his people, us, a similar lesson here. Bad stuff is temporary, God is permanent. Whatever we are going through now is only temporary. God is permanent and will out in the end, which is something we probably need to hear right now. This present trouble is temporary. It will pass. God is permanent. He won't pass. It's the message throughout the book of Daniel. Kingdoms rise, kingdoms fall. God goes on and on. Trials are temporary. Whatever we are going through, and we're going through particularly troubling and turbulent times and trials at the moment, difficult times, times of doubt and despair, times of illness, times of failure. But these are only temporary, even if they go on until we die. Not only will this present crisis pass, God will one day set things right, will make all things new, will restore, will remake. The new heaven and the new earth that John sees in another great biblical vision, the one that we know as the book of Revelation. And those who have endured, whether we're still alive or we endured until we died, will be part of God's new world, his recreated, his restored, his renewed world. In John chapter 16, Jesus talked about the future or end times. He spoke of wars and rumours of wars as being something we can expect. But that doesn't mean the end is necessarily imminent. This, wars and rumours of wars, is what we can expect in the present age. Don't be surprised. Don't assume the end is nigh. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't live as if it is, that we shouldn't be prepared for the end of time. For all of us, our end will come within the next 50 or 100 years, even if Christ doesn't return in that time. And things might get worse before they get better. Endure, persevere, don't be surprised by difficulties, remain faithful, trust in God, see the bigger picture, the longer view, because that's how God sees human history, his creation, his masterwork. God sees the bigger picture, the longer view. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't work for justice and peace whilst we patiently endure. That's what the kingdom Jesus established is all about. God's rule and reign over a kingdom of justice and peace. Being part of that kingdom should make a difference. Should make a difference not just to those of us who are kingdom people, but to those who come in contact with that kingdom. A kingdom that we, if we've said yes to following Jesus, are part of and are called to work in and for in both the good times and the bad times. Safe in the knowledge that however things appear, God is in control. Christ has the victory. And if we patiently endure, we too shall share that victory and share in God's glorious future. Keep safe, keep well, and may God bless you and keep you.